of a football club. I want my club to be sustainable. It's not sustainable. And we have a Premier League that are entitled. They feel entitled. I'm not going to use the word greedy, but I just have. Selfish. And I can't understand that way of thinking in life. It's almost like they're the big brother that sit there and almost, if you like, distribute the scraps of food to the little brothers round the table. It's not what you do when you're in a family. It's a pyramid, it's a family, and I know exactly what they're doing. They've tried to do a deal with Rick over the last 3-4 years, or attempted badly to try and do a deal with Rick over the last 3 or 4 years. If they wanted to do a deal, they would have done a deal. But their mindset is such of a bully. Their mindset is such of them that they will think that they can influence the regulator once the regulator is introduced, and that they can get a better deal potentially the other side of the regulator coming in. And then what they apply is their soft power and their sort of, if you like, influence to then try and create scare stories and scaremongering, like we had a couple of weeks ago regarding the fact that England are going to get kicked out of every competition in the world, and the England national team are never going to be able to play in a tournament again. We're never going to be able to host a tournament again. And all the fans are saying, "Oh, Neville, why do you want a regulator? We can't have a..." And you're like, oh, calm down. So it's incredible. I can't believe I'm part of the Premier League. My club are part of the Premier League in terms of Manchester United. I do not understand it. It's the cost of a right back. And I was a right back. Right? I watched Manchester City yesterday have 27, 28, 30 players in their squad. Liverpool have 30 players in their squad. They all have 30 players in their squad. We're talking about removing 1 or 2 players from that 30-man squad and making it a 28-man squad to be able to distribute that money to the rest of the league. It's not a lot. You can do with 28 players rather than 30 players, and the rest of the leagues and the rest of the actual pyramid then can be actually looked after with conditions to make us sustainable so that the game can thrive moving forwards. I mean, at the top of the Premier League, the bottom of the Premier League, position 20 in the English pyramid, get 100 million.
Yeah, a little bit more, but yeah.
A little bit more than 100 million, 110 million. The top of the Championship get 6 million or 7 million, is it? Or is it gone up a little bit now? 8 million.
For a non-parachute club.
So you think about position 20 in the English football pyramid gets 110 million, and position 21 gets 8 million. It's just not right. There is a cliff edge that just appears, which goes like that. Why would we not? I mean, Rick, one of the best analogies that I've heard is the reason that they're called parachute payments is because it's a large fall. It's a drop. Why wouldn't it not just be this? All the way through, down to League 2.
I absolutely recognise the challenge that Rick and Gary were setting out. We have to have a Premier League that is able to thrive. It's one of our greatest exports around the world. It brings enormous joy to people all over the country. It matters enormously to this country and to our government that it can continue to thrive. We also need to make sure that we deal with the lack of sustainability in other parts of the pyramid. And that is a challenge that the last government was grappling with, and it's a challenge that we're determined to crack. I have to say, having had discussions with both the EFL and the Premier League and the National League over the last few months, I've found it to be far more constructive than the way it's often portrayed in public. I think everybody recognises that there is a need for change, and that is a good starting point. And certainly the assurances that I've had from both Rick at the EFL and from the Premier League is that they want to make sure that it works for everybody. But it's our intention as a government not to come in and be heavy-handed about how to prescribe what that settlement looks like in football. It's our intention to create the framework in which football can come to that decision itself, with the regulator able to step in if it can't. So there are a number of things that the bill does, including the State of the Game report, which will allow us to see how the financial flow in football is affecting the sustainability at every level, from the Premier League all the way through down to the grassroots, and enable Parliament to then debate and take a view about what should happen next, and enable football fans in particular to understand the impact of the system that we have. Because my experience of dealing with Wigan Athletic and going through what we went through at Bury is that actually pressure from fans is an enormously powerful thing in football. You remember back when there was the suggestion about creating the Super League, and it was fans who stood up and said, we won't accept this. And the outcry created the conditions in which that decision had to change. That's what we want to do. We don't think it's the job of government to come in and be prescriptive about how sport is governed and how sport is run, but we do think it's the job of government to create the conditions in which we can reach the right settlement and the right balance, so that the situation that Gary so perfectly described, where you've got this cliff edge, where you've got some clubs that aren't sustainable, where in the EFL in particular, where championship clubs are incentivised to try and chase dreams that are often unsustainable. And I've seen that myself at Wigan. We want to sort this out, and that in our view is the best way to sort it out. I mean, it genuinely depends on, it's got to clear the Lords and the Commons. There is tremendous interest in this piece of legislation in Parliament, and so I expect we will have many lively debates. I think there will be amendments put forward on all sides. My hope, though, is that we reached a point in the last Parliament where we could all broadly live with the legislation as it was, and my hope is that we can continue in that vein and make sure that we finally get this bill onto the statute books. Once we've done that, obviously we'll appoint the football regulator and set up the office. That will be an incredibly important decision, the individuals that are involved in that, and it's something that we've been talking to partners about to make sure that we get that right. It doesn't mean that there'll never be problems in football again, but it does mean that there will be systems that, instead of the systems that failed my fans in Wigan, that failed fans in Bury, that have failed fans all over the country, just falling down at the moment when we most needed them, or worse, working against us, it will mean that there are systems that kick in that help to protect those fans and those clubs at the moment that they're most needed.